One.
Thank you. Senate Government Operations. It is Friday, February 26th, almost springtime. And we are going to hear today. We are very happy that Dr. Bell has given us some time. So what we're going to do is we're going to hear from Dr. Bell. And that's the only thing we're going to do around the MMA issue, because we'll be dealing with that when we come back after crossover and putting it on the OPR bill. But we understand that Dr. Bell has a very busy schedule. And since she's offered to talk to us today and cleared her schedule a little bit to talk to us, we wanted to honor that. So we are the Senate Government Operations Committee. Dr. Bell will just very quickly introduce ourselves and then we'll get going. I'm Jeanette White from Windham County.
I'm Anthony Polina from Washington County.
Brian Collmore from Rutland County.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor County District.
Rahm, Chittenden County.
So thank you very much for being here. And I will remind people that in our committee, we do not use chat except for Gail to send us official messages or post links to documents. So with that, Dr. Bell, we have had some information about MMA, which was kind of a topic new to many of us. And we understand that you would like to talk to us about MMA and children. And first of all, I should say that I was in the Judiciary Committee the other day when you gave your testimony, and I was very grateful for that. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. This is my first time in front of this committee, so thank you all for having me. I think I'm going to speak pretty briefly today. So my roles, I am a pediatric ICU doctor at the University of Vermont Children's Hospital, and I'm also the president of the Vermont chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And I'm really, the short version is that I am here really to support OPR's request to further, have a little bit more regulatory teeth around how to keep people safe in Vermont around MMA. So that's really my ask. I am not at all an expert in MMA or any martial art. I do work in injury prevention though. And so I'm here to talk just briefly a little bit about this topic, what I've learned. Happy to answer any questions that you all might have around injury prevention and that's sort of it. But it's really to support OPR's request. And so I got involved in this issue last summer when the Office of Professional Regulations reached out to me in my capacity as, working in injury prevention, and another colleague of mine who also does this type of work. And they reached out to us about questions around injury or potential injury or risk for injury in children in an MMA fight. And I'm not going to talk specifically at all about the details around that because that's a pending case, but I can talk very generally about what I've learned. I did watch the testimony from the 16th, which I found really helpful. So I've also already heard what you've heard from Mr. Thompson, which was really, really helpful. So what, and I thought maybe what I could do is spend a little bit of time perhaps translating a little bit about some of the stories that Rex told to you all, because I felt like I had to learn a lot of this myself too. So my process was I reached out to the National American Academy of Pediatrics. I'm part of the Council on Injury Prevention, and talked to some people who have more knowledge than I do on this topic. And then also there's a committee, a national committee within the AAP on sports and fitness. And they actually have a policy statement that was really helpful for me on martial art, all types of martial arts. I also spoke to folks involved in different types of martial arts in Vermont, and a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor who was very gracious with his time. So I feel like I have a sense a little bit about, of this, but coming from a place that I didn't know much about to begin with. So some of the concerns that national AAP have in their policy statement when they talk specifically about MMA, although these types of moves are not necessarily just in MMA, But really two types of things. So first of all, martial arts, there's a ton of benefits that kids derive from doing all types of different martial arts. So there's a lot of positives there. Some of the moves that they worry about in terms of, could lead to serious injury are moves where there's a quick deceleration of the head. So like a head strike, or like the head hitting the mat very quickly, and that can cause an injury to the head or the neck. So that's a pretty specific move. The other one is our submission holds. And I'm just going to spend a second describing what that is, because I think that helps put into context some of the concerns that Rex talked about in his testimony about why it's so important that we regulate this. And this is true for kids, but also I want you to think about these in terms of adults too, and why it's important that we have good regulation, good medical, and really good and a very objective refs. So a submission hold is one way that a match can end. So one participant could put somebody else in a submission hold. So it could be a joint submission hold. So your limb is in a certain position where you can't move, and then the participant in that hold will tap out. So, that they'll use their hand to tap out, or they'll verbally tap out. The other type of submission hold is a choke hold. And the same applies. So somebody could needs to tap out of that. And so when you think about that mechanism, you require one participant to apply the submission in a way that elicits a submission, but then doesn't cause injury. So that requires training, experience, maturity to be able to do that safely. Then the participant who is in the potential chokehold will need to know and recognize and understand their own body and know when to submit. So that also requires a lot of training, experience, and maturity. And you can imagine that this could fail if you've got very competitive athletes participating in this, and potentially like a crowd of people and like a heightened, in a heightened environment. So if those things fail, you've got the ref who, recognizing potential injury, would then call it. And so I wanted to put that in perspective, because when Rex was talking about matches that he had witnessed where somebody was saying to the ref, aren't you going to call this? I hope I'm recalling this story correctly. Aren't you going to call this? And the ref's like, no. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about potential for really serious injury here if this isn't recognized as such. And I know Lauren Lehman spoke about how important it's going to be for the refs to be objective, impartial, no financial interest. This is why. Like, they are like the last line here in terms of preventing a really serious injury. And of course, I think about kids, worrying about kids in this, and that's why I'm really grateful that this would include people under 18, not participating in this type of environment. But also, I mean, I am a pediatrician, but I think this applies to adults too. You've got competitive adults, you've got some money on the line, you've got a crowd, you need people who are going to be objective about making sure people are safe. Rex talked about some facial injuries and concerns about that. I can talk at length, and I won't do it, about the two areas that I get concerned about, and that is injuries to the neck. Lots of important blood vessels here, the trachea here, any type of swelling that occurs here can be really serious. And kids have smaller airways, smaller vessels, so the damage can be more serious with a similar type of injury. The cervical spine and the spinal cord's in here too, so that's important. And then the other piece, Rex mentioned his 16-year-old daughter, who it sounds like was in a chokehold and was unconscious. And so, there's some pathophysiology involved in pressure here that can lead to somebody becoming unconscious. And although it's something we sometimes see in like movies and videos, and that is, to me, a pediatric ICU doctor, like very concerning, especially for kids with a developing brain, but even adults. Like, we shouldn't be, people shouldn't be unconscious. So loss of consciousness is actually it's like really serious. And although I care about all of the organ systems in the body, don't tell the other organ systems, but the brain really is like the most important thing for me. So So for all those reasons, just sort of understanding this and how important it is to really like create this environment of safety. And I really appreciate Rex and others who are part of this world, who really know this world, who are really calling for safety in this. And I was a little bit, I was very grateful for OPR for reaching out to the pediatricians. And it was a little bit disheartening the way that OPR was so limited last summer and what they were able to really do. And, you know, they were able to exert some safety measures because of COVID. And so that's a problem. They should be able to do more than that. They shouldn't have to rely on the COVID restrictions to sort of take control of this situation. So I appreciate their work. I would love for pediatricians to be a part of this process, whether it's myself or one of my colleague who works in injury prevention. And really we're here, again, not as experts in this field, but just in the injury prevention piece of things. And I think that's really all I have to say. I'm happy since I'm here to chat more about this topic.
Yes, Senator Clarkson.
Thank you, Dr. Bell. That nothing surprising in your testimony, but good to hear. I really appreciate it. I have to ask the obvious question because we've just banned chokeholds from the police. Why are we allowing chokeholds at all? And I know I don't mean this as so I guess that's my first question is we've just banned them in one part of law. Why are we allowing them at all?
I will offer, looks like Rex is interested too, but I will offer that. That was my first thought too. And thinking about how folks who are trained in law enforcement, we know they don't have the ability to do this type of thing safely. And this is something I did reach out nationally about. I will say, and maybe other folks have more expertise in this or know more about this, but this is something that's a little bit hard to regulate. This was actually the topic of my discussion with a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor about like how you teach this, in what kind of environment. It does make me really pretty nervous. And so that's not something that I think we'll really be able to address.
Yeah, but we can address it. I mean, that's in our lab.
So I'm going to have Rex just respond to that.
Okay. So first of all, a chokehold is not as dangerous as people think it is. It's dangerous when somebody tries to use it that's not trained and understand how the choke actually works. There's two different kinds of chokes. There's what blood choke and there's an air choke. And you have to recognize which one of those. We train these all the time. We do flow drills all the time. You have 3 to 5 seconds on a blood choke. An air choke is much longer. The blood choke, so what you're doing is you're safely shutting down their blood that goes to their head. And what happens is it puts you to sleep. It's like a safety mechanism in your body that puts you to sleep and pumps blood to where it's needed and shuts everything else off. So at that point, those chokes, though, what the police learn at an academy is a very short, like a 2-week course or whatnot. They put just so many hours into it. These guys that are getting in the cage are actually training. Most of them have been training since they were young kids. They know these moves. We use these on a daily with zero injury. When my daughter got choked, yeah, it's scary to see if you know nothing about it, but I understand the chokes and I understand it was a head arm guillotine. So what it does is it forces this arm against this side of the carotid artery, and then the other arm comes around and cuts this side off, and it disables an opponent. And if our police actually were well versed and did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they could use those chokeholds in such a safe manner to eliminate fights without ever killing anybody. But they're not trained to use that. That's why That's how chokes become dangerous, is from untrained people trying to apply them, and they don't know how to apply them correctly.
I think also when it's administered by a police officer, it is considered a lethal weapon. I mean, because it should only be justified if
That's
you're
the difference.
in the situation where you would be allowed to use lethal weapons. So,
Yeah.
and the other thing is that in this situation, as I'm listening, just tell me if I'm wrong here, but I think what Dr. Bell was saying and made sense. So you have two people and they're both trained. And so the applier is trained, and so is the person to whom it's being applied. And they're trained to know when to, in a police situation, that isn't true. The person that's being held is not trained to say, hey, stop now, it's time to stop. And there's no referee.
So that's the very first thing that you learn is especially when you're learning chokes, you have to be able to read the person you're choking.
Right.
Because they may not, so you may have them in a choke where both of their arms are trapped and they can't tap you or verbally submit. So that's something that you have to know, and you feel it. The instant somebody goes out, I don't care if you're on top of them or underneath them. This is something that we practice, like I said, all the time. So you instantly know when somebody is out, and that's something that somebody trained will know.
Right. And there's also a referee, which makes a huge difference.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
In the case with a police officer, there's no referee to say stop. Or,
right.
Well, there should be other police officers, but there may not be. But so any more questions for Dr. Bell, or concerns or comments?
I would just like to say thank you, Dr. Bell, for actually researching that stuff. I was a bit nervous, but I'm glad you took the time and looked into it. We're really just trying to make it safe for our fighters here in Vermont.
Senator Rahm?
I'm sorry if this came up before in testimony, but I keep hearing kids train for this for a long time. How young are kids who are doing this, and what's considered a safe age? I mean, I know we teach kids karate and other martial arts, but is there an age at which a chokehold is introduced when they're a teenager or something? Okay, could someone?
Yes, absolutely. So they're not even allowed to do it's just positional movements, gaining position, gaining the advantage from either a mount or a back mount position, taking them down. So kids up until the age of 12, according to the IBJJF rules, aren't allowed to do submissions or chokeholds. They don't do any submissions because you need to have that control. Every submission, no submission, you have to explode into and make it happen. I can slowly put you into an armbar. I don't have to spin around. It's all about the control. So your first years of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is about control and getting into those positions.
So it's 12 and under that it's not allowed?
Yes, ma'am.
When?
Okay.
That's an
Yes. Dr. Bell?
I was going to say that's in a regulated situation, right? And so that's why we really want people in a regulated license.
So when I say that, I'm talking about in tournaments around the world, here in New Hampshire, Vermont, everywhere. When you go to an International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation tournament anywhere, this is the rule set that they have in place.
Senator Clarkson?
I'm really having difficulty with this. I mean, everything in so many other areas in our legislative work, we're working to acknowledge that the brain is not fully developed until young people are 25. I mean, I'm really having difficulty with. I understand regulating it is better than prohibiting it. I don't understand. I would. If it was my world, I'd prohibit this. But I understand we're regulating it. But we've invested so much in protecting the brain. We've done this with football in legislation. We've done this in our corrections, and our job is to protect our young people. And I get that you train them, but I also get that they're not wearing headgear, right? Are they wearing headgear?
We're talking about two different things.
I mean, it's just,
wait,
anyway, it just makes me insane to hear about this with young people whose
So-
brains are not developed.
so let me pull us back here a minute. We gave this time to Dr. Bell, so I would like to acknowledge her time here and use her wisely. That
Yes,
didn't sound
yes.
very good, but because she has very limited time and is very busy in that emergency room where she works and dealing with the patients. So I would like to know if there are any other questions for Dr. Bell or any issues or concerns that you would like to address to her. Yes, Senator Rahm. Mr. Ballard, we're not taking any other testimony today. We're just hearing from Dr. Bell. Thank you. Senator Rahm?
Well, yeah, I had been wondering from Dr. Bell if, you know, if there's signs that a young person's been injured that they need to learn, they need to hear in specific language, you know, can you see this, or does your head hurt, or whatever, you know, like, what do you recommend young people be trained to look for as symptoms if they have a bigger problem than they realized right after a fight?
Yeah, so in part of writing up what some of our concerns were around injuries, there's sort of injuries that can happen in the moment and then injuries that can then happen later. And so, you know, I would almost separate the ones that I'm concerned about are airway related injuries, which, you know, you could have like an acute, what we call laryngospasm with like, if you have like a blunt injury to the airway. But then you could also have, you know, some compression and then later have some swelling. And so that's something that we worry about that would happen over some hours afterwards. And that's why it's so important to have coaches and medical professionals available. In terms of like, say, repeated episodes of, you know, lack of like what we would call cerebral hypoperfusion. I mean, I think this is something that, you know, certainly talking to their pediatrician about would be really important. And I think on our end, Senator Clarkson, to some of your concerns, I do think that what we can do from a chapter standpoint, from a pediatrician chapter standpoint, is really educate our members, our pediatricians, on some of these different, like, you know, moves where there's, again, like a lot of positivity around martial arts. Some people, some young people do really well with it, but understanding what are some of the moves that we really don't recommend young people doing. And those would be like those deceleration forces. And then for me, it would be any type of chokehold. That's what the National American Academy of Pediatrics says, that they shouldn't be doing that. And then understanding things like, how do we help our families find reputable places? How should they go about researching this? Like, what should they look for? Like, and these are things that, like, I'm just kind of learning about. And so I think we can do some of that work on our end to let our members know and be a resource for how to, like, find really productive places where people can go and understand more about that. And so I'm looking forward to working with people who know more about this so that we can do this kind of in a collaborative way. I do think, just because I'm a little bit of a pathophysiology nerd, I do think that, for the record, I will just characterize what Mr. Thompson said around the carotid body pressure as not safe. That's not something that I think we'll probably differ on that. But in that case, you're putting pressure on pressure sensors, and your body thinks your blood pressure is high. It drops your heart rate, it vasodilates, and then you can have low blood flow. I will say that, to Senator Clarkson, to your point, this was something I did look into to see if I could find reported what types, you know, nationally, of like reported injuries. And I will say that from my own look and from talking to other folks, really what I was finding is injuries, serious injuries related to the unregulated space and people who've never been trained. So I really felt
Thank you. I
I
appreciate
really felt the same way as you when I started this, like, what? And then, you know, there are concerns like, you know, stories of people like totally untrained people, young people, like watching an MMA fight or something and trying it at home on each other. Like that has led to badness. But I did really spend a lot of time looking to see if I could find I was also just worried about people who may be trained in this, who then use it in another setting. And then that was also something I couldn't find. And in speaking to some of these instructors who are there, they do, you know, again, not something that I would necessarily promote for my patients or my own friends or family, but they, you know, they're like, you have to reach certain milestones before you are taught how to do this. And that there's like a lot of discipline involved, and there's this sort of like environment of respect, and the culture is sort of cultivated again in a good gym and a good training facility that works on that. So I did have a lot of your concerns and felt more that what we could do is help families find places where these types of things could be done safely, or other versions of martial arts could be done. And I look forward to this is not, I mean, I want to keep working on this with folks who could sort of help us think through this.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well, I think that just I believe about 4 years ago, we did something around mixed martial arts. And I don't remember what it was, but I remember thinking, this is really just brutal, horrible, awful stuff. And even the words we use, like cage, we put them in a cage instead of, I mean, I'm used to thinking of a boxing ring, which sounds much less, much
Less violent.
Right. But it actually probably is more violent than being in a cage. And anyway, I don't want us to get into it. Our time is up for this, but did you have one last thing you wanted to say?
Yes, I just wanted to clear something up. When I was talking about the kids and stuff like that in the grappling matches, nobody is asking to put kids inside the cage, anybody under the age of 18. What I was talking about was the actual grappling matches, and the grappling matches are refereed by high-level black belts, and it's a very, very controlled setting. They are allowed to do submissions from 12 to 15, and then once they get to 16, they can go into the adult class. And it's a wrestling match with submissions, and it's very, very regulated. So nobody's asking to punch kids in the head or anything like that, or choke little kids out. We don't do that in our gym. Nobody is asking that whatsoever. I was just referring to the BJJ side of it.
Yeah. So we will take more testimony on this afterwards. I just wanted to, when we originally set it up, I think our thought was that we would be doing something with it before crossover. And so we needed to get speeded up a little bit, but we're going to take this up. I don't know if you know what crossover is, most of you, but it's March 12th, and it's the day that bills that originate in the Senate have to move out of the Senate so they can get to the House so they can work on it, and vice versa. So what we're going to do is the House is working on an OPR bill, a general bill, and we will be adding this to that bill. So we don't have to, we're not under time constraints right now. So after March 12th, when we get their bill, we will then take this up again and make sure that we get the right regulations in with OPR.
Perfect.
Does that make sense, everybody?
Yes, thank you.
And you will stay on the list so that the next time we take this up, you'll be notified that we're taking it up. And you're welcome to join us anytime.
Thank you. I appreciate you all doing this for us.
Thank you. And you're certainly welcome to stay and listen to our next conversation if you'd like, but we understand that you all have busy lives. We're taking up our cannabis bill. Thank you. Bye, Lauren. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to go to what is S25, and we don't really have the bill because it's in judiciary. What we have is just, we're looking at certain parts of it. I can't even find my S25 folder now. Anyway, we're looking at parts of it, and what we're primarily looking at is the part that affects municipalities and the structure of the board, because those are really in our purview. But we can, if we have time, we can get into other areas. We also have Senator Rahm's amendment. So those are the kind of the three major areas that we're looking at. Gail has posted on the website two things for today. One is the draft of a bill that is being introduced in the House by Representative Chena, and there are some things in here we might want to look at, but since it's a House bill, we won't be dealing with it in total until it comes over to us, and then part of that again may go to us and part to judiciary and part to agriculture. So and then the other one is a piece that was posted by Gregory and Pizzulio. Is that the way you pronounce your name, Greg?
It's Jeffrey Pizzullo.
Jeffrey.
No
Yeah.
problem. Long Italian
Okay.
last name.
And that is a piece that he has submitted, and they're both on our website. So with that, and I want to, while you're here, and we are expecting Mark Hughes to join us. He did say that he would be a little late because he had something else going on, but he will join us. But I want you to know before we start that at 2:30, shortly before 2:30, like seconds before, Gail will tell us that it's 2:30, and we will leave our meeting for about 20 minutes. We will come back, and I think probably, Gail, because it's such a long break, should we all sign out and then sign back in, or how is the best way to do that?
If you want to, you certainly can, but you could stay on. If not, I will take us off live stream for that period of time, though.
I don't
Okay.
think we'd be in two Zooms at one.
Huh?
Isn't it a Zoom?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a Zoom.
We
I
have to
think
leave.
we're gonna have to leave.
Okay,
I don't
we
want
have
people to
to,
get confused. We have to leave to get on.
we have to leave, but other people don't have to leave if they don't want to. Okay, got it. All right, thank you. So with that, let's, is Tucker by any chance with us? Do you know if, Gail, if he posted anything, or Michelle, maybe Michelle?
Michelle's with us.
Yes, I do see that. I asked Tucker, let's go to on S25, go to the very first thing we dealt with here, which is the section 1, the opt-in vote. Michelle, did you get anything from Tucker on that? Okay, I asked, but it may have been late, and I know people are really out straight right now. What my suggestion was that instead of having this here as it is instead to somehow frame it so that if there has been no vote by March of 2023, putting it out because of the acknowledgement that we're running late in the towns. Many of the towns don't want to vote on it because they don't know what they're voting on. But if there has not been a vote by March 2023, that on the day after that town meeting, it will be considered an opt-in town. I mean, it will be considered a town that allows retailers. That's the way we did it with alcohol. there was a drop dead date. If you didn't vote by that date, you couldn't prohibit after that. Welcome, Mark. And Mark, before we go to Gwen here, I just want to, because you just joined us, I want to tell you also that at 2:30, Gail is going to remind us that it's 2:30. The committee members are going to leave because we have to go to another meeting for about 20 minutes. You're welcome to stay. She's going to take us offline, but we have to leave to go to another Zoom meeting and then we'll come back. I just wanted you to know that.
I'm gonna miss you.
Yeah, this hardly ever happens in committee, but the 2 days that you've been with us, we've done it. Anyway, because yesterday we did it for the joint assembly. So, Gwen, did you want to comment on that?
Just a point of clarification. I think moving the date back is great. I think that's much more reasonable. And then it does clarify things too. If you don't have a vote by a certain date, then by default, you would be considered to have opted in. My question would be, is after that March 2023 date, would that mean that a town couldn't go back and say no?
They could go
later?
back, and my understanding is they could go back and say no at any time, but if there was a retailer set up.
Well, obviously, if they're grandfathered in, they're grandfathered in, but if they were to change their mind, right? Because even now, if a town is not, let's say they're not a dry town, there's like very few dry towns left, but there still is the option where they could decide to be a dry town. I don't know a lot of towns that want to do that, but so they would still have that option.
Right.
Okay. I think that's a much more reasonable. I think that, it's not exactly what we wanted, but I think pushing it past next town meeting to that next town meeting. So like we have at least, because by next year, hopefully things will be, hope semi back to normal. Then it'll still give, and then licenses will start going out. The first establishments will, be up and operating by later that year. And then by that beginning of the next year, that'll be the final time where towns will be able to, weigh in. I think that seems to be, I think that's a cleaner way of going about things. And I just doing it in 2022, next town meeting just is very, very difficult and feels very rushed. But I think by the next year, they'll have much more information to go by. So I think we'll be much happier with this resolution.
And then not telling people how to word it on their ballot. They can word it on their ballot the way it makes most sense in their community.
Right.
But, okay.
Yeah, I think by default, anyways, really all they're able to vote in on is retail, and then those communities that have dispensaries now that would be integrated licensees, they're separate, but they're still going to have retail in them. So it's like it just makes sense. The only way they're going to be able to have any say in it anyways is retail, because the rest of it's just by default they're allowed. So we appreciate those two changes. So thank you very much for your consideration on them.
So does anybody have questions about that part of it? Or can we just?
So we're saying the automatic opt-in happens next town meeting.
No, a year
if they
from
haven't, if by March 2023, they have not had a vote, then they are automatically considered a town that will allow retail.
Right. Okay. 2023. I don't even know what year it is anymore, but great.
Yeah.
It's a long time from now.
If we put it at 2022, they have to have things on their warning by January.
Right.
And we don't even have a board set up yet that's making regulations. So
the governor addressed that briefly in his press conference this afternoon, sort of about 12:30.
Really?
Yeah, because the press was pressing him on when is he going to have it, when is he going to get his, when is he going to appoint people?
Oh, and what did he say?
He said he was doing, it would be done by the end of the session. Somebody said, well, how quickly? And he said, well, we're working on it. And he said, well, definitely by the end of the session. Somebody said, well, well, how quickly? And all he said, I believe that's what I heard, was by the end of the session. So the session at the moment is ending mid-May, but if the session is extended.
Even if it's mid-May, that puts us 2 years behind
Yes,
schedule.
exactly.
And that's
So I
ridiculous.
think we need to,
Okay. Well, we need to, but I'll tell you who needs to put the pressure on him is not us. The people that need to
Does.
put the pressure on him are the advocates in the community, the agricultural community, the,
yeah,
all- yeah.
absolutely. So
Yeah.
first of all, they should clarify what he said today because he had to address it and just clarify what he said. But I
Yeah.
believe I heard by the end of the session.
Okay. All right. So,
Madam Chair,
yes.
you'd asked if there was any questions on what had been covered, and at the expense of potentially taking a little bit more time, I'm just going to do it. That little thing that I called over prescriptive, I think Gwen was, and hi Gwen, it's good to see you. I think you were saying you had a problem with that last time I was here, and it sounds like that language has been removed in terms of the specifics of the ballot question itself.
Yes,
Is that correct?
all that would say here is that if a town has not had a vote by March 2023, they would be considered a town that allowed retail. It would say nothing about what they had to put on their ballot or anything else, or that they even had to have a vote.
All right, thank
And
you.
we'll get that very specific language from Michelle or Tucker. But that's the intent, is to just take those lines 15 through 18 out and replace them with a drop dead date. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay, so are we done with that committee? Any more comments or questions on that? Okay, moving right along. What I'm going to do, I think, is I don't know, Mark, if you were here when I said that really in our jurisdiction is the board and the responsibilities and makeup of the board. But we'll address that first, and then given any time constraints, and the third thing is Senator Rahm's amendment. So we'll address those two things, and then given time, we can go into other things just for conversation. But those are the two things that we really need to address today and make sure we settle on. And we also are going to have this on if we don't get things completely settled today, we will have this on the agenda again next Tuesday, that we can take it up. Okay, does that make sense, everybody? Okay, so let's go then to the board. And the way the board is structured right now is that there are 3 board members, an executive director, and an administrative assistant. But the 3 board members have certain responsibilities, are all appointed by the governor, and a member can only be removed for cause by the other 2 members of the board. A board member cannot be removed by the governor. And that's in the statute. So that's the makeup of the board. And they have a lot of responsibilities. I know that in Gregory's, on his page, they're not numbered, but his section 3 addresses the regulatory body. So Jeffrey, would you like to
Sorry, where
give
are
us
we
your
finding
thoughts?
that? Where can we find that? Because I'm looking at S25 as drafted.
It's on our document. Gail put it on our page.
Is it the cannabis social equity piece?
It is.
No. Is that what it's
I
called?
don't see it. I just have Michelle Childs and cannabis social equity.
It is the social equity one. I'm not allowed to post something as a bill unless it's actually in our committee.
That's not the one.
Oh, that's
There's
the one that Peggy gave me, Senator.
She only gave you one?
Yes.
Oh, because
this is Brian China's bill.
yes.
Right. That's all I have also.
Jeffrey has a 3 or 4 pager here that I thought
Okay.
actually,
If I may, I can drag files to the chat. I don't know if technically that's appropriate or not, but I do.
we don't use chat.
So if you could email it to us, that would be good. We could see it in email.
Okay.
And
Or-
include me, Jeffrey, and I'll post it.
Okay.
And you can also there's only 3 bullet points under it. So
So just just tell them to us.
There's
only
also, in S25, there isn't anything about the board.
Right.
So it's
Right.
not part of
Right.
S25. This is just something that's a proposal by a witness. So
Yeah.
This is a proposal to add this, to make other changes to S25.
I'm
It is
happy to
not-
read it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just the regulatory body part. You have only
Certainly.
3 bullet points under that.
Yep.
So why don't you just tell them to us?
I will read it, and just so you know, Gail, I did email it to you just as background. Okay, so section 3 that we have.
Sorry, just if you'd be kind enough to introduce yourself for the record.
Oh, I apologize. Lots of hearings, and I apologize for that. For the record, my name is Jeffrey Piscitello. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Vermont Growers Association. I'm also a professional cannabis grower. And we represent, we're a C4, mutual welfare organization, and we represent the cannabis professionals in the state as their trade association. Think of us similar to the Vermont Brewers Association back in the 1990s with Greg Noonan, and when they were seeking the craft beer marketplace that we enjoy today. So that's us.
But so can I just clarify that a little bit, because that came up after the meeting yesterday about, but there really aren't any professional growers legally, right? We're trying to bring them into the legal market.
Yes and no. You know, I don't want to waste your time with that, but professionally in terms of income, no, that would be illegal. But there's more to simply growing than making a living off of it in terms of expertise and skill set, that sort of thing. You know, I've been doing this for over 2 decades, but that's one of the taboo, I want to say, right, natures of this emerging marketplaces. We're dealing with illicit actors who are trying to come out of the shadows, and that's very difficult for me personally as an activist. So this is not easy. So thank you for underscoring that.
Yeah, and I know when we were first dealing with this, we heard a lot of people who wouldn't come forward at all because they were admitting that they were involved in an illegal activity. So, okay, but thank you. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No problem. And happy to expand on, my personal background in the future if need be as well. So getting back to what we're calling the ag and economic equality points for S25, and referring to section 3, which I believe is on the 3rd page, if you guys do have the document in front of you. Section 3, regulatory body. Point 1, create a process with which members of the Cannabis Control Board may be removed, either through the advisory committee or the executive and legislative branches. Point 2, the advisory committee to the CCB must be seated and active prior to the CCB providing its recommendations to the legislator. So if we recall, currently under Act 164, the advisory board is seated after, for instance, the CCB introduces or delivers sweeping reforms to the legislative body, you guys. And finally, the 3rd point under section 3, the advisory committee to the CCB will have a 2/3 majority enabled veto power to override decisions made by the CCB. So those are their 3 brief bullet points in our proposed language.
So committee, does anybody have any technical questions right now about, to clarify that? Okay, I guess we understand what you're saying here. So can we have a little bit of conversation about these? Take the first.
Can we, I just still don't see them anywhere.
Look at
Gail,
it.
did you email them to us? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to be a good doobie and read them. because for those of us who don't serve on judiciary, we're less familiar with all of this. I mean, for example, how many members are on the advisory council? I forgot.
Senator Clarkson, I just posted it and I can forward that to you.
Oh, great. You're wonderful. Thank you, Gail.
But I don't believe that's in here anyway, because that isn't.
Jeanette, would it be helpful if I just reviewed what the current law is?
Yeah.
Yes. And
And then we can all be good doobies.
yeah, well,
It's still not-
exactly.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
To use that.
I couldn't resist.
It's still not on our page though.
It's still not on our page. I don't know where. Yeah.
It takes a couple of minutes to update sometimes. I just did it. It was,
Okay.
there seemed to
great.
be a lag in me receiving it. So it should be up there shortly.
Okay,
Thank you.
what we're going to do is we're going to have Michelle tell us what the current law around the Cannabis Control Board is, not their duties, but just how they're constituted, and then who the members of the advisory committee are.
Right.
Okay?
Great.
Okay, Michelle.
Sure. So there are 3 members, as Senator already mentioned, there are 3 members of the board, and that's the process that's playing out right now, where the governor has the names from the nominating committee, and he is to select 3 members for the board. There is also an advisory committee, and there are 12 members on the advisory committee. They are not state employees the way that the board members are. They receive a per diem and expenses, and they're from a variety of backgrounds. And I can see about pulling up would you like me to pull up the membership? Would that be helpful?
Sure.
Is that already set? The advisory board is set. It's just
The advisory,
board.
but not the individuals, but who, like from which types of expertise and who is the appointing authority, all those kinds of things. Let me see if I can real quick.
And while she's pulling that up, I will say that the Cannabis Control Board the members were supposed to have been confirmed on January 15th. So they were then supposed to have been seated and started their work on January 19th. Clearly, we're behind that. And if the governor doesn't appoint them until the end of the session, we're going to be really behind. Then there were a number of reports that they were supposed to bring to the legislature for action, a number of action items. The advisory board is not seated until May. So that's the.
And I can show you the timeline too.
Yeah.
You should have co-host abilities.
Great. Okay. How's that? Can you see that?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So here's the advisory committee. And so when Senator White was talking about the timeline, it's critical in thinking about how this all rolls out, because you have to have the board in place and they have to hire their staff before you start to bring in the advisory board. So it's all kind of stacked on one another. So with the delay in appointment of the board members, it's obviously delaying everything. And we do have this issue of the board is supposed to report to the General Assembly on April 1st this year on a number of issues that are really in your purview to be deciding instead of the board, things such as fees for licenses. So we've got a little bit of a crunch here. And that was one of the things I was going to ask the chairs. Would you guys be looking at the timeline and figuring out whether or not you need to adjust that as opposed to a judiciary? So I just
We could.
So for the advisory committee, you can see it's 12 members. So you see in subsection H, subdivision 1, and you see the folks there. So a member with an expertise in public health appointed by the governor. It's the Secretary of Agriculture, Food and Markets. Someone with experience in laboratory science or toxicology appointed by the governor. Someone with expertise in systemic social justice and equity issues appointed by the speaker. A member with expertise in women and minority-owned business ownership appointed by the speaker. There's a member with expertise in substance misuse prevention, appointed by the Senate Committee on Committees. A member with expertise in cannabis industry, appointed by the Committee on Committees. Someone with expertise in business management or regulatory compliance, appointed by the treasurer. Someone with expertise in municipal issues, appointed by the treasurer. Someone with expertise in public safety, appointed by the AG. Someone with expertise in criminal justice reform, appointed by the AG, and then also the Secretary of Natural Resources. So those are the 12 folks on the advisory committee. And you'll see here that the appointments to the advisory committee are supposed to be made on or before May 1st. The board can establish subcommittees within the advisory committee if they want to do that. And then here's the business about the about reimbursement. I'm gonna stop sharing that if that's okay, and then I'm gonna go to the timeline.
Just wait, let me just ask
I'm
if
sorry.
people have any, if people have, can you take that down for 1 second, Michelle, so I can
Sure.
see people? Thanks. Do people have any questions about the advisory, the makeup of the advisory? Senator Rahm?
I just wondered the committee's intent around having the treasurer appoint the municipal expertise person.
You mean just a question, why is it the treasurer?
Yeah. The treasurer like appoints a lot of people. It just seems kind of strange.
I think so.
So-
My recollection is that from initially, so the board initially was created, it came out of Senate Judiciary, and it had 5 members, and you had appointments by Speaker, Senate Committee on Committees, the governor, the treasurer, and the attorney general. And so that got scaled back in appropriations to only 3 members. There was not yet an advisory committee. It went to the House, and then in House GovOps, they put it back to 5 members. Same type of, and then Approps put it back down to 3. So you see a pattern here, and there was concern among folks about wanting to have certain perspectives reflected in the board's decision making, but because the board is so small, they were concerned. They say, well, we don't want to, if there's only 3 board members, we don't want to require, we don't know who the applicants will be. We want to have the best applicants. And if we say one board member absolutely must have experience in agriculture, then, well, maybe there's, somebody else would be a fabulous candidate, and then they're kind of stuck. And so what House Government Operations decided to do was the creation of this advisory board. And so tried to bring in issues around social justice and substance misuse and law enforcement reform, things like that, and to reflect that in the advisory board rather than just trying to cram it all into the 3 members of the board.
Mm.
So treasurer, I think, was just a relic from before where treasurer had appointing authority. I don't remember there being a whole lot of discussion. I think they were just looking for, like a constitutional office, somebody who might have some fiscal experience and would look at those particular issues.
We can suggest changes.
I would think you just say, I'm not trying to look at Gwen, but you just say somebody from VLCT. I don't know why we'd have the treasurer do that.
Right.
I think Michelle is right.
Yeah.
Gwen?
We never provided testimony on this when the Government Operations Committee chose to add the treasurer's name. We never objected to it either. 9 times out of 10, when there is a constitutional officer position, or even, secretary, like if the, Speaker of the House or Senate Pro Tem is charged with finding a municipal person, what they generally do is reach out to the league anyways. And if it's not an employee of VLCT, they'll ask us, are there city managers or select board members or whomever that would be appropriate. So, I think we're okay with the treasurer. It's hard to find a constitution. It's kind of hard someone at the state level that has that, connection to municipal government, except for the legislature. So, I think we're okay with it because I think Beth Pierce would be, she would most likely call VLCT as the first
Okay.
person.
Okay, yeah, I would say that there are a lot of changes to be made here
Okay.
that we want to make, and okay. Any other committee have, Allison, and then I'll call on you, Mark.
No, I was just going to say, we reviewed this last year.
No, well,
Yes,
not,
both the board things I thought we weighed in on.
we weighed in on the Cannabis Control Board, but I don't think that we really weighed in on the advisory committee because that was such a last minute thing and it was part of the negotiations going back and forth and back and forth.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I
whether
knew
we did
weighed
or
in
not,
on one of them.
okay. Senator Polina or Collmore, did you have any questions or concerns about this, of who's here and what they are? Okay. So the first suggestion here is create a process by which they may be removed. Right now, the only way they can be removed is by the two other members for just cause removing them. The legislature, the administration, and the advisory board have no role in the removal. Do we want to address that? Yes, Senator Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just trying to figure out why somebody would be removed. If we spend so much time and energy picking the right people, what would a situation become that they would need to be removed? I'm just trying to understand.
I think you might find that maybe somebody is setting up the regulations, the licensing in such a way, is promoting it in such a way that their friends are more likely to get licenses than others, or that they themselves have decided to, like insider trading, that they know what's coming up, and so they're likely to. Those are the things I can think of.
That certainly explains it for me. Thank you.
And what are their terms? Are their terms 3 years?
So I can pull that up. Is it okay to share the screen?
Yeah,
Sure, or if you just want to tell us. We're talking about the Cannabis Control Board now.
Correct.
Yes.
I just can't remember what the length of terms and how many terms they can repeat.
So you'll see here subdivision C2, all board members serve a term of 3 years or until a successor is appointed. And then, so you have the process for vacancy. And then here on subdivision 4 is the provision that Senator White was talking about. So when the board you'll recall that when you originally created the board, it was important to you to have an independent entity, that was not going to be directly answering to the governor. You wanted it to kind of be somewhat insulated from the political shifts from term to term. And so it's an independent entity. And originally that's why you had the appointing authority. You didn't have the governor appointing like he is doing now. That's something that happened in the House, where the House Government Operations had supported the Senate's position and wanted it to be independent and wanted independent appointments, but the governor was very opposed to that. And so the House made a concession trying to collaborate with the administration and came up with this process that you wound up with in Act 164, where you basically have the nominating committee and then the governor does all the appointments. But they chose to keep this particular provision that it isn't the governor that removes people, it's the other two members on the board, and it's only for cause.
So, committee, where are we here?
So there is a way to remove people. It's just not the way Gregory is proposing.
Jeffrey,
sorry. Craig.
that's okay. I started that. I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
So,
and Can I just clarify, is the
Yeah.
cause has to be, it's for an illegal, so if you're removal for cause, it's they violated the law, they violated the regulations. There are provisions in the statute around conflicts and things like that. So if somebody did have a relative who had a cannabis business who was applying for a licensing, those are in violation of the statute. So it's those types of things.
So then, Madam Chair, I guess my question to Jeffrey is why are these provisions inadequate?
Yes, would you like to address it? Michelle, do you want to take that down?
Sure.
Thanks.
Certainly. Outside of that characterization, what I can share is what we have observed in other states. So over the years, studying other state law, we brought up Michigan recently. Massachusetts is another state that Senator Bryan, I know you brought up the issue of, what are some of these real world concerns that play out in these scenarios? What we saw in Massachusetts was there were, and this is a risk in a lot of states that have a centralized agency for regulating the adult use marketplace. And that is the risk of, either individuals with undisclosed close ties that are removed, through family members and whatnot, and that exists. Serving as regulators that once were in the industry, in whatever capacity. And without going down hypotheticals, we can look at other states where they either were forced to reform their regulatory agency or remove members, or otherwise deal with issues that come up from lack of responsiveness, not meeting milestones in formation and implementation rollout. And mind you, we're seeing that now in this state. So a lot of this really is the intent to make sure that we're hitting our milestones, we're arriving at a viable and successful marketplace, and most importantly, one that's inclusive and equitable. So that's how I would respond to that. So if other board members theoretically can remove one of themselves, does that pose any issue? Would those two other, members, for whatever reason, not follow through with that accountability? I don't know. Those are things for you guys to explore. What we see in other states is that's not always the case.
I think we do not want the executive branch to be able to remove, because then that removes
No,
the
I agree.
independence.
Yeah,
So we do
I
not want
agree.
that. And I'm not sure that we want the legislature. The legislature can impeach people, but I don't think we can remove, I don't think we have the ability to remove board members. We have the ability to, we have to confirm them, but I don't know that we have the ability to remove them once they're confirmed. I don't.
Just to follow up on the Michigan anecdote, Senator White, since we talked about it yesterday, I looked into that more, and the reason why they dissolved that entire agency was because of what we're talking about now. That was their only outcome. The governor was dissolved that agency to deal with a regulator who was, in effect, dragging his feet in terms of issuing licenses to Michigan residents, as opposed to the dispensaries who were their pre-existing actors, similar to our state.
Other committee members, Senator Polina?
Yeah, I just have a basic question, maybe for Michelle. Just wondering how usual or unusual this is to say that they only can be removed by the other board members. Is this common practice?
It's elsewhere in law. I'd have to check with maybe Ameren just to see.
But it's not totally unusual or anything.
No, not at all.
Okay.
I think that my feeling here is that we don't even have the board appointed yet. And the reason we're not making deadlines has nothing to do with the board. So if one of the reasons were to make sure we were meeting our deadlines, when we interviewed board members, they were all very concerned about that and knew that they were going to be working, whoever was appointed was going to be working probably 40-hour days for the next few months to get us back on track. So my, I don't know about other committee members. Mark, do you want to weigh in on this particular issue? Or do you have no?
I was just getting ready to go get more coffee. So
Okay.
there is a part of it that I do want to weigh in on, but I don't know that this is the right time. I think my concern is really twofold. Part of it has to do with the process itself, the appointment process, and the challenges presented to perpetuate the structural racism within the system itself.
Right.
Whereas with the appointments start from the governor right. Puts those three folks in, those three folks, so I mean, and it's kind of like, and I'm reading actually the report, the Social Equity Caucus's report on this, and Susanna Davis and those folks, there's Susanna's report too, but they have some pretty significant recommendations surrounding these areas. And I was wondering, had the committee reviewed this report?
I have. I did not. I don't remember seeing anything about the Cannabis Control Board.
Or removal, because right now we're just trying to, I think, focus on the removal process.
I think your point is well taken, which is why I started the conversation with, I didn't know whether this was the right time for me to do this. But when we're talking about it's almost skullduggery, because in a way, what we're doing is we're talking about a process that exists. We've already passed the point in which we should have had this particular conversation, because first we should be talking about how to get the folks in there in the first place. Okay. So again, it sucks to be me, because I got to be this guy who comes into these conversations and throws the monkey wrench in here. But I'm willing to park this part of the conversation and revisit it at a later time. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's wise, because we do have a process in place right now, and the process has started. It isn't moving very quickly, but it has started. And I think to upend that process right now means we're at least 3 years behind and not 2. So
yeah, but there is one question that I did have, and I want to delineate the Racial Equity Task Force report, which you may have reviewed, from the Social Equity Caucus Work Group report,
right?
Which is what I'm looking at. So I just parked that there, and no, don't want to upend the process, but would be curious to hearing, in light of the fact that the process is significantly delayed, and I'm already hearing that there will be some legislative action to elongate that process, but to be able to stretch it out legislatively instead of waiting for a judiciary action on it, then would this not be the time to talk about how we might be able to integrate more of these recommendations in terms of process in addressing structural racism that's embedded within this at that point?
I understand your concern. I'm not sure that I see how it fits with the 3 recommendations that are being made here about the Cannabis Control Board, because
you're right, it doesn't.
Yeah, what we're talking about now is just the Cannabis Control Board. Do we want to set up a different process for removal? Committee members.
Madam Chair.
Anybody?
Yes.
No, committee members, just committee members.
Yeah, I'd be willing to have some discussion about it. Yes.
Okay, what would you like to do?
Well, I think you raise a good point, Madam Chair, by not including either the executive or legislative branches for the reasons you noted. So that's left us with the advisory committee, and I guess I could see a way to have that happen.
To have the advisory committee have the ability to remove a member?
Yeah.
Okay. Other people? Other committee members? Senator Polina, and then Senator Clarkson.
Well, I was just gonna say, I'm not really sure, to tell you the honest truth. I think it's worth talking about some more, but I feel like we have limited options. So at this point in time, I really can't say whether I would support keeping it the way it is or not without hearing what the other options might be.
Senator Clarkson?
Yeah, I agree with Anthony. It's either 3 people, 2 people move to oust one, or 15 people. And I in some ways like to have an either or all. I mean, it would be great to involve the advisory, but also I'd like to hear about other boards where they have the responsibility and opportunity to oust, to remove a member. So I think it's the first time I thought about it, so I would be loath to make a decision today.
In either case, I think it would have to be for just cause.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
Agreed.
Absolutely for just cause. It's just, who is it? Do we give the opportunity to one or the other or both? To me.
Senator Rahm?
What states did this committee or did the committees of jurisdiction consider as a best practice or a model when the bill was being crafted?
We took tons and tons of testimony from many states, and there's many different models out there. I will say that the Senate had a 5-person cannabis control board that was appointed by one by the governor with certain expertise, one by the speaker with certain expertise, one by the speaker with expertise, one by the treasurer, and one by the AG, all with very specific backgrounds or expertise. And that was our position. So this is not the Senate's position, but this is what we agreed to. So this is where we are.
Okay.
And I can't tell you what other states the House looked at when they came up with this. I don't know.
I mean, my thought with this and probably other questions that will come up is we have the opportunity to learn from other states that are further along than us. And now we've had even more time to see, was there some kind of drama that erupted in another state around a member? How did they handle it? Did that go well or not? I just think we have the benefit of not being first. And I would hope we take advantage of that somehow with other states that.
As long as we can do it by Tuesday.
Well, that's why I was like, should I Google stuff? Like, I'm just curious what the news has been on other states lately.
Well, I mean, Jeffrey did bring up the Michigan, and all they did was they couldn't figure out how to get rid of the one person who was being bad. So they dissolved the whole thing. I mean, I think that we can do better than that.
Right.
So Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My thought on just allowing the other 2 members of the control board to do it is one might agree and one might not. And then where are you? You've got a tie. And in essence, you haven't done anything because you're, so I think there has to sort of be an odd number. Now, 15 people, maybe that's too many. Maybe you should have a subgroup of that 15-member advisory council that's charged only with removal, and you make it a 5-person. I don't know what the right answer is, but I do know that you're going to have a 1-1 tie in a lot of cases, and that doesn't work.
Right. I mentioned 15 because it's 3 and 12. It's 12 on the advisory board, I think. So it's an even number also on the advisory board.
Oh, I thought it was 15. I'm sorry.
I mean, you could have
I
some.
mentioned 15 because you have the option of either or, and if you included all 15 of them weighing in on it. But obviously one of them wouldn't be weighing in because one of them was being removed.
You could have that either a majority or 2/3 of the advisory board could take action, which would give you a second. It's 2:30, I believe.
Oh,
it's almost 2:30.
It's very close.
It's very close. So let's think about that and come back with that. Perhaps having, and the advisory board is set up to be specific experts in areas. They're not just general appointees. They are there because they have a background in lab science and toxology, or in systemic racism or in public health. So they are there for very specific reasons, but you could do something like 2/3 of them, which is an option.
Madam Chair, can I make a note before we
Yes.
take our break? And that is that I've been in touch with Tucker and he's going to try to join us this afternoon.
Oh, great. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So we will see you, Jeffrey, Mark, Gwen, Michelle. We'll see you
Please.
later.
I'm not available after 3, so
Okay.
sounds like maybe it might work out if Tucker can join me then.
Yep. Okay.
So, and then also Anthea knows that you might be discussing the 2% local
Yep.
Option. And so if you decide to do that, you can just email her. She can pop out of House Transportation.
Okay. And we might not get to that till Tuesday. But,
Okay.
okay.
All right.
So we'll
Have a great weekend, folks.
Thanks,
Oh,
Michelle.
you're not
We'll be
coming back
back.
to us?
I'm not going to be able to come back this afternoon. I
Okay.
appreciate the invitation.
All right, so we are back. We took a little break there for a while. We had, it may, to many people, it may not have seemed important, but we, 26 of us, no, 26 of us served under Tim Ash as pro tem. The 4 people who just joined did not, but we all felt it important to give him some kind of a send-off because we couldn't do it because of COVID before. And so what we did is we had a little presentation of a gift to him and a little roasting, I guess, is what you might call it. But and I'm just gonna say, is everybody there when Chris Pearson made his comment?
No,
He said
we left.
You all left and I stayed.
Yeah, we
I'm
left
sorry.
at 3 because when Becca left, I thought it was ending, and then I thought, oh, we're 10 minutes late for the witnesses
Oh.
anyway because we said 20 minutes.
I'm
So I
sorry.
left.
I am so sorry. But so what Chris Pearson said was, it seems to me that all the themes running through this are saying 2 things about you. You're a pain in the ass and we all miss you and love you. And that is exactly what it seemed. So, all right. So I guess we're ready to get back to business here. Did anybody think about the idea of perhaps allowing another removal process, which would say maybe 2/3 of the advisory committee?
Amarin sent us or I guess Michelle or Amarin sent us something that was
Sure.
another option, but I do like the advisory committee having some power like that. I don't know.
What was the other option? I didn't see it. I haven't.
It was more concrete language about the rest of the board being able to remove that. Oh, it was the Green Mountain Care Board. She sent us a
Right.
language of the Green Mountain
Oh,
Care.
Because
okay.
I asked for other examples of
Okay.
it.
Right.
So she said the board has to adopt rules to define the basis and process for removal. So it's like giving the board another task, which is to decide how it's going to go about removing one of its members.
But I think there's a nice idea of the advisory board having to be listened to because they have a little bit of power in that
Right.
sense, like a real power. That's kind of a nice thing.
I agree with you. I think it's a good idea. And just the Green Mountain Care Board is 5 people. This is just 3 people. It's really awkward.
Mhm.
And
So
as Brian says, they could be divided, even the 2 that are
Yeah.
left. So, it makes no sense to just leave it to 2 people.
So if you did 2/3, it would have to have 8 people. Which if you got 8 people, if convinced that there would be pretty substantial reason to remove somebody, I would think. Anybody
agree.
else?
No, I agree.
I agree. I think that makes some sense.
Okay.
Are we
So we'll
saying that
recommend that?
that would be the way to do it, or would they have 2 options? One is the other members could do it, or the advisory committee could do it? We're
Yeah,
not taking
2
away the other members.
I would say 2 options.
Right.
Agreed.
Okay. All right. So the next recommendation here is that the advisory committee be seated prior to the board providing its recommendations to the legislature. It does seem to me that if you're going to have an advisory committee, that perhaps you should listen to it before you make your recommendations.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know if, I mean, this is just offering language. I would think maybe we say something about seated and they allowed to review the recommendations, you know, some formal like role that they have, because otherwise seated is like, they could do it, they could seat the people and still give us the recommendations like 2 days later.
I agree. There's no time for them to, you know, it's not substantive. It's fine.
Well,
for
they
them
could
to be
say,
there, but they won't have reviewed it.
the commission would provide guidance to the legislature after review by the advisory committee.
I'm not sure review, I would say in consultation with, because I'm not sure that you want them to be consulting with them, but these are, remember, volunteer positions. And if they're going to have to review every recommendation, I mean, some of the recommendations are, they should be reviewing and in consultation with the concepts and the principles, but probably not whether they charge $12 or $15.
Right.
Sure.
That
No,
might
I agree.
really matter, but I hear what you're saying. We don't want the language to be binding, but you know, like there's nothing that doesn't seem consequential that they shouldn't review. They should be allowed to review whatever goes before the legislature before it happens.
Yeah, I'm not sure how
review-
that will do timing, because that means you're going to have to get 12 people together for every report you bring to the.
How many reports are they bringing to us?
Oh, they're bringing tons and tons and tons of things. They're bringing all the rules, all the licensing structures.
Oh, you mean like one, but not every quarter, but like they have lots of things due to us next January.
They have lots of things due to us in April.
April 15th or whatever.
Wow. Okay. This is skullduggery or whatever Mark called it. How do we give anyone a chance to review? Maybe, I don't know. I want to hear from the advisory commission before we make decisions.
Getting them appointed first is our challenge.
Okay.
I would say that the advisory, we can change this, and because the advisory committee is not appointed by the board, there are some appointed by the governor and then the speaker and the different people. We can give a date by which they should be appointed, and then we could make that date be, probably couldn't make it much before April 1st.
It's in what, Michelle, it's May 1st, I thought.
Yes, but the reports are due to us. They aren't going to get to us by April 15th. We know that.
Forget it. That's not happening.
But if we say that the advisory committee has to be appointed by April 1st, at least it gets them there before recommendations are made to us. Yes, Brian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you make a good point. To me, the word review implies that they have to sort of give permission or sign off or agree with what the board has come up with. I would rather have them be consulted, which doesn't mean anything more than, you know, they develop sort of collaborative decisions, perhaps, but they don't have to approve it. Does that make sense?
That is where I am. It makes sense to me, because these people are being appointed because of their very specific knowledge. So to have somebody with a background in lab science and toxicology making having to review and give the thumbs up for how many licenses there should be I mean, they are an advisory board, so I think that they should be in consultation with. But
what is required in the statute, what's required of the CCB to weigh the advisory board's input?
I don't think there's anything. Do you remember, Jeffrey?
Yes, in our notes, we do have, let's see here. The advisory committee is created within the Cannabis Control Board and, quote, has no stated purpose or duties beyond advising the committee. So it seems there's lots of discretion there from our standpoint.
Well, we've gone beyond what you would ask for. You just wanted them to be seated and active. We're asking that they actually be consulted.
Yes. I mean, what's their, if they're not, if the CCB isn't required to consult them at all, then why do they exist? I mean, the CCB could function without them.
It was, again, if I had to do it, I wouldn't do it this way at all, but this is the way it is. And so I think that if we change the date to April 1st, that they have to be seated by April 1st, and that they have and change, we can change that language that Jeffrey just read to us, and put that the recommendations will be developed in consultation with the advisory board, or something like that. Tucker and Michelle can do their magic. Does that work?
I'm fine with that.
Anthony?
Yeah, that works. I have a different kind of question. So this advisory committee, we're saying it has to be assembled by April, whatever. Who's supposed to make sure that they're assembled by then? I mean, who do we get mad at if they're not there in time? Is somebody in charge of making sure it happens?
We get mad at the governor for 3 appointments, the speaker, the committee on committees, the treasurer.
So we would have
AG.
to do that, though. We would be up to us in a sense.
But is there a staff convening them? Like, how are they supposed to meet?
Well, they meet, they are an advisory committee to the board. So the board is constructed, and then they hire an executive director and an administrative assistant. It would be the administrative assistant and the executive director that would be giving administrative help to the board. The advisory committee, we could actually put in there that the advisory committee would be convened by a call. I mean, that somebody could convene them for their first meeting before there's an executive director and an administrative assistant. We could do that. We could have the
well, there should definitely be some convening before we get the report, I think.
Well, they need to convene.
Sure.
Yes. In order to make consultations or to consult, they have to have convened.
Right. So let's put that they have to be seated by April 1st, that the board works in consultation with the advisory committee, and that the advisory committee will be, that their first meeting will be convened by, I don't know that we can ask legislative council to convene them.
How about the executive director? The executive director will be
The
hired.
executive director will not have been hired yet. That's the problem here that Jeffrey is pointing out.
How about,
is that,
yeah. How about the Senate Government Operations Committee? We could convene them.
okay. All right. We'll convene them. Okay. Tucker, got that? We're going to convene them.
Got
Okay.
it. Duly noted.
We're at least in place.
And we will have convened them by April 15th. Okay,
Okay.
does that make
I'm confused. I'm sorry. What does
Well-
it have? Do we convene advisory boards? Is this a normal thing? Can we do that?
no, but there
No.
isn't anybody to
Normal.
do it.
Okay. So is it like a joint meeting, a special meeting, an evening meeting? Like, are we asking these people to come in the middle of the day to committee? Like, I'm just confused about the mechanics of this.
we'll just figure out how to do it.
All right, I'm
So-
down.
I mean,
Yeah,
these people are going to be appointed. They're going to know that they're on an advisory committee.
Hmm.
My guess is that for the most part, the advisory committee will be meeting during the day.
Okay,
It will not be meeting at night. It could, but my guess is that it will be probably meeting in the day or late afternoon sometime.
do
And
they
we
get
can-
a per diem for their meeting?
They get a per diem.
Okay,
$50. Very.
Brian?
So I'm just thinking this out loud too, because I've never convened anything except breakfast. What about if we just said to the 12 of them, they have to be appointed by the 1st within a certain time, pick 7 days, 5 days, 10 days, whatever you think. They have to meet and decide who the chair, are they going to have a chair?
They can decide their own chair.
So by their very meeting, they've convened. If I'm,
Yes.
Yep,
No,
that's a good.
but somebody has to be responsible for saying, when should we meet? You can't, 12 people aren't going to take that responsibility.
Okay,
So somebody, it could be the agent, it's the Secretary of Ag or nominee or designee. I mean, it could be that person because that is the person that could be asked to convene the
yeah,
the
because
group.
there's a connection there to ag.
There's
Yeah.
yeah.
So Secretary Tebbets would have to say, we're going to meet next Tuesday. All 12 members must be there. And once they meet, they can figure out who's going to be chair and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
that works.
Allison?
Maybe not.
So my only concern with that is that that's a creature, the secretary is a creature of the administration. And so if the administration isn't supportive of this move and getting things going, they might drag their feet on that too. I mean, we're eager to get all this going. So we have a vested interest in action and in movement. So
Well, the
I just
person,
have-
we have to depend on the governor to appoint the 3 people. Once the 3 people are appointed, it could be that person. And it isn't necessarily the secretary. It says or designee. The secretary could say, I don't want to have anything to do with this board. I'm going to appoint Graham, and I don't remember his last name, who's the policy person for rural Vermont. Or I'm going to appoint somebody from NOFA, or I'm going to appoint the head of the Farm Bureau. I mean, it doesn't have to be the secretary. But
Yeah,
they
but-
have to be appointed by the governor first. So we're depending on the governor to appoint that person more than to call a meeting.
Yeah.
Tucker?
Some of the standard language around these sorts of boards and commissions would state that on or before X date, X officer of the state shall convene the board for its first meeting. And
Mhm.
then there are procedures that play out during that first meeting, including the election of the chair. So if you make decisions around the timeline you would like to see and who should convene, then legislative council should be able to craft something for you that would meet that deadline and require the convening of this particular panel and the start of their first meeting.
So let's say April 1st, they're appointed. They have to meet by April 15th, and they will be convened by the Speaker of the House.
we can do that.
Sure.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was wondering the same thing. If we said Government Operations Committee, people might look down, not like that idea, but I was going to suggest they be convened by the Speaker and the President Pro Tem of the Senate. But if it'd be fine with me if it was just the Speaker, I'm not taking sides on it. I just think if you wanted to balance it out.
Tucker?
I believe it is often the Speaker of the House that is put in control of these things because in the Senate, it is not the pro tem who has that power. It is the Senate Committee on Committees.
All right. Well, I could go with the Speaker.
And I believe the Speaker is as interested in moving this forward as many of us are, so.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's the case. Good. At least we now have
So we have solved 2 of those issues. Now, if I can find my piece of paper, the third suggestion here, have we?
The
Are we done
advisory
with that one?
committee, yeah, no,
Wait, Jeffrey, are you okay with that?
Yes, sounds good so far. Thank you. I appreciate the deliberation.
So now the third one here is that the advisory committee will have a 2/3 majority enabled veto power to override decisions.
we're giving them
I-
all sorts of
I
new powers.
I
Removal,
personally don't think they should have the ability to override because it's the legislature that approves or doesn't approve the recommendations, not the advisory committee, but that's my feeling.
Well, I mean, I don't think we have to give them this direction, but I think we just want to know, it helps an advisory committee if they know what their powers are. You know, if their power is to make to weigh in some way, to make a recommendation to, you know, are they advising the board or are they advising us?
They're advising the board.
Okay, so then we're requiring the board to consult with them before they release their recommendation. So then what we want to know from the advisory board is if they felt sufficiently consulted with, not that we have to put that in legal language. I'm just trying to understand if we hear from the advisory board, we'd want to know, well, we advised this to the Cannabis Control Board. They didn't accept that, you know,
Sure.
advice from
And
us.
they may not accept some of
Right,
the
right, but
things
we
that
might
are-
want to know. We just want
Right.
a minority.
Yeah, and we can have them come in. And my guess is that certain people are going to be asked to advise on certain things and not the entire board on everything. For example, if you're talking about levels of concentration in a product, that might be the lab science and toxology person. But if you're talking about the social equity, rolling that out, you might talk more to the person who has experience in dealing with systemic racism, or I'm dealing with kids and how to keep kids out of it. You might be talking more to the person whose expertise is in substance abuse. So the entire committee will advise, but there might be instances where certain people are picked for their expertise to advise. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So where do you want to go with this last?
Jeffrey has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
And I don't want to go backwards too much. I did want to bring this up while we're talking about basically the makeup of the advisory committee. And that is, come March of 2022, under Act 164, the state's medical program, I believe, is to fold under DPS and fold into the CCB. So if, with that context, if the CCB is tasked with administering our state medical program moving forward, presumably at or around March 2022, was there any consideration for the advisory board with regards to the medical program? And if not, just curious.
I will tell you where I think that happened. The House did not want they didn't want to deal with the medical part at all. They had it completely out of their bill. So they didn't think of that when they were setting up this advisory board. So I think you're right here, and I'm glad you brought that up, because we might want to have somebody on here that represents the dispensaries.
That would give it that odd number, 13. I don't know if that's relevant. I wanted to put that, we feel that concern from our constituents about the medical program.
Yeah, and I think that's how it happened, is because they set up the advisory committee, but they took out the movement of the medical marijuana program. So that was put back in, and then, yeah.
That makes sense. I appreciate you explaining that. And I don't know if those are familiar, but under, I believe, DPS and the VMR, the Vermont Marijuana Registry, there is, I believe they have their own advisory committee, if I'm not
They
mistaken.
do.
I don't know if they meet anymore, but that might be a good starting point if there is consideration in this area.
That there would be somebody appointed by that. Well, no, it would be somebody, we'd have to have somebody appointed. Could be the governor appointing
Good point. Yeah.
that
good
person,
point. Thank
because,
you.
and that advisory board is quite active.
Again, just wanted to put on your radar.
No, that very good point. Anybody else want to?
Oh, good point. I agree.
Okay. All right. So thank you for bringing these forward.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate you guys spending the opportunity to look into these. These are sometimes seemingly nuanced issues that are very important to many Vermonters across the state. So I really appreciate your time on these.
So,
Yes, Senator Clarkson.
so Jeffrey, could you give us a sense when you talk about how important this is to all these people around the state? How many people, by your guesstimation at the moment, because you represent them, so you probably have a good notion of what size community are we talking about? How many, what you call professional growers are there? Give us a sense of the universe as it exists now.
Great question. Difficult to give concrete answers to. I will say that, you know, the term professional grower, so we're not, you know, we don't have a legal state or a tax and regulate framework yet, but other states do. So I'll give you an example. One of our members is a business that consults in legal states. You know, they get hired by a company that wants to set up an adult use shop. So there are different sort of nuances to these labels outside of what's sort of you know, currently happening in Vermont. With regards to our community, there's, you know, we like to throw out the 2,000 figure. There's just, you know, probably just under, I want to say 2,000 small businesses waiting to engage this marketplace. Now, a couple footnotes there. Not every single one of them will be operational, right? What we see in some states, you may successfully apply for and get issued a license. That doesn't mean that that business will be operational. There are other realities to developing that business, whether it's storefront, employment, what have you. The you know, the conventional issues that do come up during business development. Cannabis is not excluded from that. So we are looking at a good sized, hopefully craft-centric marketplace in this state that is well represented in all corners. We do have pretty good membership in every corner of this state.
And, wow, so 2,000 small businesses contemplating in some form of development.
That's on the, yes, that I would say that's sort of the maxed out figure.
In Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
And there, as you point out, I hope we're smarter here with our helping people with business advice than we are with artists, because what we see is that there are really great artists and performers out there who try to set up a business and it fails because they don't have the business background and expertise. And we've gotten better about that, but so many of these people will need help with legal structures because they're not doing it legally now. So they need, how do you do a business plan, the legal structures, how do you, all of those things, how do you hire people? And because now if they hire people, they're going to have to hire people using human HR laws and follow all of that. It's going to be very different for people, like you say.
And you know, the more we can make this market ultimately accessible to everyday Vermonters, the quicker you guys will see a return on investment. You'll see the, you know, the effect of you know, other small businesses generating revenue.
Allison, are you okay?
I think a spider just fell on me. It was, I mean, just like swished down. It was, it was awful. Sorry, I should have turned my picture off, but it happened so fast.
No, it's quite entertaining.
It was. I thought maybe you swallowed a spider for a minute.
No. No, but you know, spiders in your hair are yucky.
Okay, sorry about that, Jeffrey.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
Sorry, I apologize. I'm not quick on turning off the camera.
No, but you're right. The sooner we get all these things worked out and the sooner we get people in there, the sooner we'll start to see revenue. We should have been seeing revenue 2 years ago, but
we'll get there. We'll get there.
We'll get there.
Slow but steady.
Okay. So unless people want to keep talking, I would say that we're going to do this on Tuesday when we come back, because a judiciary wants to do the markup of the bill. So we'll get these, we can actually get these changes to judiciary before Tuesday morning. I mean, I can bring them in on Tuesday morning, and that's the municipal issue, the board, how to remove members from the board, the board makeup of the advisory board, and seating the advisory board and the timeline for that. And then we can look at what we'll look at on Tuesday then is primarily Senator Rahm's amendment. And I would urge us to read the and I think by then this will be actually put into the hopper and introduced as a bill. This is a draft, and according to Michelle, this is a little bit different than what Representative Chena actually introduced. So I'll get that put up, and we can look at that in relation to that whole issue. And then anything else we want to look at around cannabis. Does that work? Oh, and the 2%, if we want to hear, if we just want to hear what that from Anthea, what that is.
Right.
Sure.
I'd love to hear that. That would be great. And all your other proposals, Jeffrey, are being taken up by judiciary.
Okay, I was going to ask.
Yeah, we told them that we would do the board, primarily the board, because that's our responsibility.
Right.
And
but is judiciary looking at your other recommendations?
We've walked through them, and we have them. I don't know where we are with them. I think we're dealing with that on Tuesday morning also.
Oh, okay. Very busy Tuesday then.
Every day.
Every day. And sadly, our town meeting week off is looking flat out.
Keisha, did you have?
Well, it's a different topic. I just, before we adjourn for a week, I just wanted to make sure people knew that one of the last Black women who is serving in local elected office, Rachel Edens, decided not to run again and is withdrawing her candidacy. That leaves, I believe, just Zariah Hightower on the Burlington City Council as a Black woman serving on a select board or city council, not school board. And then there are 2 Black women running in Middlebury and Bennington. And there's a Black gentleman running in St. Albans. And I really think we need to schedule, when we get back, a discussion of harassment and threats to local candidates. And that's what I wanted to say.
We will definitely do that. And the other thing, before Allison and Anthony, I'm just going to say that I'm going to try and figure out setting up either Thursday or Friday as an executive session.
Thank you. Thank you. I will talk to people about what that might mean. Thank you very much.
Okay. So, Anthony?
I was just wondering where the person you're talking about was serving. What community was it?
Hartford in my district.
Oh.
I watched that select board meeting till 10:30. That, you know, the information candidate, it was the information meeting and the candidates night. And until I got off, it was very, I mean, it wasn't easy, but it was a very good, robust conversation. It was reported in the Valley News yesterday. And I'm so sorry things have happened since then to affect Rachel's decision, because she was she presented beautifully. She was thoughtful. She was so terrific. And many of her concerns were addressed in the course of the conversation. So, and other candidates' behavior called out during the course of that meeting. And so it was a very it was a pretty direct conversation. And I was hoping she was feeling very supported after that.
We
And
might
so
want to hear from people like her, Lisa Ryan, who's also not running again, just the people who have behind the scenes done a lot to try and protect themselves and are putting on as much courage and sort of positivity as they can in public settings, but are not feeling safe.
Do you actually know Rachel? I mean,
Yes.
I know Becca does. Becca does, so I can get. Because I'd love to reach out to her this weekend. I'm very discouraged to hear that she has withdrawn. That's too bad. That's a loss for us in Windsor County and in Hartford.